fix this after the President signs it, and that's what we intend to do. I urge my colleagues to vote for this bill and move forward.
Gentleman from Connecticut.
I yield myself 1 minute.
Gentleman's recognized.
Madam Speaker, I salute Mr. McHenry, my friend from North Carolina, for his work on this bill. And I think it's probably worth talking a bit more about crowdfunding. I appreciate the Chairman's point of view. But let's be clear here. We are talking about marketing done at retail investors, up to $10,000 more. Mr. McHenry called the Senate activity ill-conceived and burdensome. We are at the nexus here of potentially unsophisticated investors and people who see an opportunity. I would remind Mr. McHenry, in citing a charitable background for this bill, when you give to a charity, you know you're not getting your money back. When you invest in a company, you hope you're getting your money back, and we should be vigilant that that, in fact, occurs. With that, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Connecticut reserves. The gentleman from Alabama is recognized.
We have the right to close, so I would ask the gentleman from Connecticut to proceed, and then we will. I think we have. Could I inquire as to time?
The gentleman from Alabama has 2 minutes remaining. 2 minutes.
2 minutes, and so I'll allow the gentleman from Connecticut.
10 minutes. 2 minutes for Alabama. 10 minutes for Connecticut.
Thank you. I'm glad this isn't football.
Okay.
Gentleman from Connecticut.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and let me again reiterate my thanks to Chairman Baucus, to all of the members of the Financial Services Committee who worked hard on this bill. I think we've had a lot of good debate around very real and important issues, and unusually for this institution, we've actually managed to keep the ideology and the barbs out of it. And I'm very, very appreciative of that, and I know that the American people are as well. I appreciate, coming as I do from a district and a state that will rise or fall on our ability to innovate, to grow small businesses into real world beaters, to have a financial services sector which is vibrant and innovative but safe. I very much appreciate the intent of this legislation. We had good support from both sides of the aisle. The President is supportive. We heard from industry associations that this was a good thing. And so with that, I encourage all of the members of this body to support this legislation. Thank again the Chairman and the Ranking Member of the committee, and yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Connecticut yields back his time. The gentleman from Alabama.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Yield such time as may consume the balance of my time.
Gentleman's recognized.
Let me say this. During this debate, we focused on crowdfunding, but I think we are all in agreement that this bill is a great improvement, and we will revisit that. But that shouldn't distract from the fact that this is a major piece of legislation that will cause, I think, a great deal of new competition, innovation, new products and services. And in my revised remarks, which I intend to submit in the next week, I'll highlight biomedical research, which we think the potential to address some diseases that are rare diseases or degenerative conditions will really receive a boost from this. And with that, I yield the balance. So I commend all our members. And we've come together here and we've accomplished great things, along with the Senate, the House, and the administration. Yield to the gentlelady from Illinois.
I thank the gentleman is recognized.
Gentleman for yielding. And Madam Speaker, the proposals contained in the Jobs Act are not political or partisan, as has been mentioned. They come from the small business community in districts like mine, where I meet regularly with local employers who tell me that accessing capital is the hardest part of enduring the current recession. Many of these changes in this bill have bipartisan backing and have been endorsed by members of the President's Council on Jobs and Economic Competitiveness. Today's legislation will enable America's startup companies, the job engines of our economy, to access the equity markets, not just the debt markets. This is a bill that will give investors and emerging growing companies, perhaps a future Google, Apple, or Home Depot, the opportunity to reach investors, cut through the red tape, and overcome the financial barriers to success. I ask my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to support the bill and yield back.
All time has expired. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and concur in the Senate amendment to H.R. 3606? Those in favor will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed will say no. In the opinion of the Chair, two-thirds being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended. The Senate amendment is agreed to, and without objection, the motion to reconsider, the gentleman from Alabama.
Madam Speaker, I would request a recorded vote.
The gentleman asks for the yeas and nays.
Demand the ayes and yeas.
Yeas and nays are requested. All those in favor of taking this vote by the yeas and nays will rise and remain standing until counted. A sufficient number having arisen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I send to the desk a privilege resolution and ask for its immediate consideration.
And the clerk will report the resolution.
House Resolution 596, resolved that the Clerk of the House of Representatives requests the Senate to return to the House the bill H.R. 5 entitled, An Act to Improve Patient Access to Health Care Services and Provide Improved Medical Care by Reducing the Excessive Burden the Liability System Places on the Health Care Delivery System.
Without objection, the resolution is agreed to, and the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. The Chair lays before the House the following enrolled bill.
Senate 2038, an act to prohibit members of Congress and employees of Congress from using non-public information derived from their official positions for personal benefit and for other purposes.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I, by direction of the Committee on Rules, call up House Resolution 595 and ask for its immediate consideration.
Clerk will report the resolution.
House Calendar Number 121, House Resolution 595, resolved that at any time after the adoption of this resolution, the Speaker may, pursuant to Clause 2B of Rule 18, declare the House resolved into the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union for consideration of the bill H.R. 3309 to amend the Communications Act of 1934 to provide for greater transparency and efficiency in the procedures followed by the Federal Communications Commission. The first reading of the bill shall be dispensed with. All points of order against consideration of the bill are waived. General debate shall be confined to the bill and shall not exceed 1 hour, equally divided and controlled by the Chair and Ranking Minority Member of the Committee on Energy and Commerce. After general debate, the bill shall be considered for amendment under the 5-minute rule. It shall be in order to consider as an original bill for the purpose of amendment under the 5-minute rule, the amendment in the nature of a substitute recommended by the Committee on Energy and Commerce now printed in the bill. The committee amendment in the nature of a substitute shall be considered as read. All points of order against the committee amendment in the nature of a substitute are waived. No amendment to the committee amendment in the nature of a substitute shall be in order except those printed in the report of the Committee on Rules accompanying this resolution. Each such amendment may be offered only in the order printed in the report, may be offered only by a member designated in the report, shall be considered as read, shall be debatable for the time specified in the report, equally divided and controlled by the proponent and an opponent, shall not be subject to amendment, and shall not be subject to a demand for division of the question in the House or in the Committee of the Whole. All points of order against such amendments are waived. At the conclusion of consideration of the bill for amendment, the committee shall rise and report the bill to the House with such amendments as may have been adopted. Any member may demand a separate vote in the House on any amendment adopted in the Committee of the Whole to the bill or to the committee amendment in the nature of a substitute. The previous question shall be considered as ordered on the bill and amendments thereto to final passage without intervening motion, except one motion to recommit with or without instructions. Section 2. the Speaker may appoint members to perform duties of the Chair for the duration of the period from March 29, 2012 through April 16, 2012, as though under Clause 8A of Rule 1.
The gentleman from Florida, Mr. Webster, is recognized for 1 hour.
For the purpose of debate only, I yield the customary 30 minutes to my good friend and colleague from Florida, Mr. Hastings, pending which I yield myself such time as I may consume. For the purpose of this resolution, all time yielded is for debate only.
Gentleman's recognized.
Madam Speaker, I ask for unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks.
Without objection.
Madam Speaker, I rise today in support of this rule and the underlying bill. House Resolution 595 provides for the structured rule for consideration of H.R. 3309, the Federal Communications Commission's Process Reform Act of 2012. The rule makes 10 amendments of the 11 amendments submitted to the committee in order. Of these, 8 are Democrat-sponsored amendments and 2 are Republican-sponsored amendments. As noted in the subcommittee ranking member, Ms. Eshoo, during the Rules Committee meeting on this last night, H.R. 3309 has come to the floor under the regular order. The Energy and Commerce Subcommittee and Communications Technology held an oversight hearing and subsequently a legislative hearing on the federal communications process reform. The subcommittee then circulated a discussion draft before holding an open markup and favorable reporting the bill to the full committee on November 16, 2011. On March 6, 2012, the full committee ordered the bill favorably reported to the House. In 2010, the communication and technology industry invested $66 billion to deploy broadband infrastructure and $3 billion more in 2009. The new products and services are innovated by a sector of this sector of this almost daily business. With the innovation comes high-quality jobs and marked improvements for every American's quality of life. As a result, all efforts should be made to avoid stalling this important economic engine. The FCC should strive to be on the most open and transparent agency in federal government, and any intervention into the marketplace should be the result of rigorous analysis demonstrating the need for government regulation. The Federal Communication Commission Process Reform Act would change the process the FCC must follow in issuing regulations and limit the agency's ability to set conditions on transactions relating to corporate mergers and acquisitions. The legislation would require the FCC to be more transparent and methodical in determining whether to intervene in the communication marketplace, in dealing with customers and regulated parties, and in reviewing transactions. Customers, small businesses, and outside Beltway stakeholders in particular do not have the regulatory lawyers needed to rush review of proceedings. The only way to get their input is to give them time to provide feedback on well-delineated proposals. Before it starts intervening, the FCC should make sure it has a full understanding of the state of competition and current technologies. By requiring the FCC to be more transparent, to find a market failure before proposing regulations, and to conduct cost-benefit analysis before adopting rules, H.R. 3309 helps promote jobs, investment, and innovation in one of the few sectors still firing on all cylinders in this economy. In particular, the bill prohibits the FCC from coercing parties to accept concessions such as network neutrality obligations as a condition of approving their mergers. Such conditions are typically unrelated to the specifics of the transaction and involve requirements the FCC otherwise lacks the policy justification or legal authority to impose. They also chill transactions that might otherwise advance the economy and impose unnecessary cost on businesses. The bill requires the FCC to survey the marketplace through a notice of inquiry before proposing new rules which would increase cost for customers and businesses, to establish the specific text of proposed rules before their consideration so the public and industry know what is being considered and have adequate information to provide input, much as House leadership has adopted in the layover requirement for the bills that we now hear on the floor. To identify a market failure or customer harm and conduct a cost-effective analysis before adopting an economically significant rules that cost more than $100 million. To set the shot clock and schedules for issuing decisions to report to Congress on how well it is abiding by them, so the public and industry know when issues will be resolved, and to create performance measures to evaluate the effectiveness or ineffectiveness of programs that cost more than $100 million. These proposed process reforms are not radical, nor are they an attempt to cripple the FCC, or as some opponents of the legislation have claimed. Instead, this legislation seeks to put forth and put back the curtain of bureaucratic regulation of a sector of our economy that has provided high-tech innovation and investment and high-quality jobs that come with it, despite the economic downturn. So once again, Madam Speaker, I rise in support of the rule and the underlying legislation. I encourage my colleagues to vote yes on the rule and yes on the underlying bill, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Florida, Mr. Webster, reserves his time. The gentleman from Florida, Mr. Hastings.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and I thank my good friend from Florida for yielding the time to me, and I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Madam Speaker, this rule provides for consideration of H.R. 3309, the Federal Communications Commission Process Reform Act. There may be beneficial provisions in the underlying legislation to make the FCC's processes more transparent and more efficient. I do suggest that the FCC has made great strides in this regard under the leadership of Chairman Janikowski, and certainly more can be done. But the fact remains that my friends on the other side of the aisle have squandered important opportunities in this process to walk the walk and talk the talk. Now, last night, an amendment was offered by my good friend and colleague, Congresswoman Anna Eshoo, to require FCC disclosure of spending on political advertisements, which was opposed in committee but made in order to go forward today. Recent Supreme Court rulings, especially the Citizens United case, have opened the door for unlimited spending by wealthy entities aiming to influence the electoral process. These individuals, organizations, and corporations have the financial resources to reach millions of Americans through cable, broadcast television, the radio, and other media. Unfortunately, Americans do not yet have the right to know who is paying for these efforts. Under current law, Americans have no way of knowing whether an advertisement urging them to vote for a certain candidate or support certain legislation is being done at the behest of someone who stands to make a lot of money from that candidate or the bill. There's no way to run a country, there's no way to hold an election, and there's no way to run a government. Since Citizens United, our government is less like a democracy and more like a mystery. I firmly support the Eshoo Amendment and ask all of our colleagues to do so. It aims to provide some clues by requiring the disclosure of any individual or corporation who contributes $10,000 or more for the purpose of airing political programming in an election cycle. This amendment is modeled after the Disclose Act, sponsored by my friend and colleague, Congressman Chris Van Hollen, of which I am a proud co-sponsor. Both these measures educate voters by disclosing who is donating money to influence the electoral process. It is as simple as that: transparency, accountability, and democracy. Yet some of my Republican colleague friends continue to be baffled as to why the American people will want to know who's trying to influence them. Last night in the Rules Committee, my good friend from Georgia, Mr. Woodall, was indicating his notions regarding this, and I said to him what I say to all of our colleagues and to all Americans, that the day somebody shows up with $500, you would be interested to know if they are opposed to you, who they are. So the question remains, why do some Republicans oppose these efforts now? Madam Speaker, we know full well about some of the biases that some Republicans have in favor of the wealthiest Americans. When they're not trying to eviscerate social safety net programs, as I suggest in the Rules Committee, in 40 minutes we will be taking up the proposed budget that does just that, to make room for tax cuts for the well-off in our society. It appears that Republicans are eager to allow the richest Americans to hijack the electoral process, because that is about what to happen, and it is and will be a hijacking. When vast sums of money are used to influence the democratic process, the voices of those who do not have such resources get drowned out. And when that influence is allowed to remain in the shadows, suddenly we find that the wealthiest interests in this country are the ones driving the bus, the train, the plane, and the rest of us do not know where the stops are. This amendment, along with the Disclose Act and similar efforts, aims to provide Americans with the basics of who is spending how much on what. It does not impose any new obligations on broadcasters or providers. It does not hold broadcasters or providers liable for inaccurate information, and it does not take action with respect to posting this information online. This is a simple disclosure requirement. It benefits all Americans. It is good for democracy. Quite frankly, I think that a commendable thing occurs when many of the amendments are made in order, and in this particular instance, I'm especially pleased that my colleagues made the Eshoo Amendment in order, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Florida, Mr. Hastings, reserves his time. The gentleman from Florida, Mr. Webster.
I reserve my time.
Gentleman reserves his time. Gentleman from Florida, Mr. Hastings.
Madam Speaker, I'm very pleased to yield 2 minutes to the distinguished gentleman from Oregon, my good friend, Mr. DeFazio.
Gentleman from Oregon is recognized for 2 minutes. Oregon.
Thank you. Thank the gentleman for yielding. I rise to urge members to vote against the previous question. Now, why would we do that? Because we need to invest in America's crumbling infrastructure, and the Republicans are totally incapable of producing a transportation bill. Here's a little bit of review of history. February 8, 2011, Chairman Mica, we will have a bill by August. Then we skip forward a little bit, August, Chairman Mica, I will agree to one additional highway program extension, meaning they didn't get the bill done by August. Then we fast forward to November, Speaker Boehner, House to pass highway bill this year. That was, of course, November 2011. It's 2012. And now the Republicans are saying they need another 90 days to get agreement in their own caucus. They're never going to get agreement. There are 80 members of the Republican caucus who believe that there is no federal interest, get this, no federal interest in a national transportation system. It should devolve to the 50 states, back to the good old days when Kansas built a turnpike and Oklahoma didn't, and the cars were launched off the end of the turnpike into a farmer's field for another 5 years until Kansas finally got around to it. Let's go back to those good old days. They also say they don't want to create jobs. This won't create jobs, the Speaker has said. Well, guess what? Transportation investment is the best way to create made-in-America jobs. Transit equipment made in America. Steel made in America. Construction jobs by Americans, for our future. They can't get it done. No more 90-day extensions or whatever they're dithering around now. They got the throttle on the floor and they're spinning donuts, but they've run out of gas. So it's time to act. And what we need to do is defeat the previous question, bring up the bipartisan Senate-passed transportation bill, which half of the Republican senators, some of the members of the Flat Earth Society even, voted for. Bring that bill up here. We can get the votes on this side of the aisle and pass it and put America back to work.
Gentleman from Florida, Mr. Webster.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to inquire if the gentleman from Florida has any more speakers, because I'm prepared to close.
I appreciate my colleague for asking. I was hoping that Mr. Bishop from New York would be here, but in light of the fact that he is not, I'm prepared to close.
I reserve my time.
Madam Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume, and if Mr. Bishop does arrive, then perhaps I would use some of my time to yield to him. We all know that this legislation is never going to pass the Senate. And so this exercise remains just that, an exercise. Republicans claim to be in favor of reducing the size of government. But this bill will require the FCC to hire 20 additional staff at a cost of $26 million over 5 years just to handle all the additional work created. Rather than focus on stimulating the economy, funding infrastructure investments, and improving our democracy, my friends on the other side insist on devoting time and energy in a pursuit that is never going to go beyond this chamber. Rather than support transparency in our democratic process, my friends on the other side want to shield the best off in our society and corporations from having to disclose their financial influence on the political process. And rather than work with Democrats to craft comprehensive bipartisan legislation that can pass the House and Senate, Republicans would rather see their partisan bills die than allow a compromise measure to live. I would say that I'm appalled, Madam Speaker, but this kind of thing seems to happen all the time around here. Madam Speaker, if we defeat the previous question, I will offer an amendment to the rule to provide that immediately after the House adopts this rule, it will bring up H.R. 14, the House companion to the bipartisan Senate transportation bill, and to discuss our proposal, and I will continue closing afterward. I yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from New York, Mr. Bishop.
Gentleman from New York, recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and I thank Mr. Hastings for yielding, and I apologize for my tardy arrival on the floor. As Yogi Berra once said, it's deja vu all over again. Here we are a week later, and we still have not addressed the imminent expiration of our highway programs. As we witnessed with the implosion of H.R. 7 6 weeks ago, we once again saw last night the inevitable result of the Republican mantra, my way or the highway. Last night, House Republicans were forced to remove from floor consideration their short-term extension bill, in part because they absolutely refused to reach out to their Democratic colleagues to get anything done. Meanwhile, I have sponsored the Senate bill, MAP 21, now called H.R. 14 here in the House, a bipartisan path forward that makes meaningful reforms and provides certainty to states. I'm proud to be offering this bipartisan legislation to refocus the discussion on jobs and economic opportunities rather than the Republican message this week of tearing down Medicare and protecting the 1% at the expense of middle-class families. As of today, House Republicans have yet to put forward a credible highway reauthorization that puts America back to work. Their only attempt, H.R. 7, the Boehner-Mica authorization, was called the worst highway bill ever by United States Department of Transportation Secretary LaHood, a former Republican member of this body. Was drafted in the dark of night without Democratic input. Removed transit, the transit guarantee, from the Highway Trust Fund, and it couldn't attract a single Democratic vote nor even a majority of Republican votes. MAP 21 passed overwhelmingly in the Senate with a bipartisan majority, vote of 74-22, and is fully paid for, something House Republicans seem unable to come close to. MAP 21 pay-fors are less controversial than the House Republican bill. The Senate has estimated that MAP 21 will save 1.8 million jobs and create up to 1 million more jobs. During a weak economic recovery looking for a jump start, this is the kind of bill we need to be passing, and passing as quickly as we possibly can. Is MAP 21 the silver bullet to our service transportation needs? No, but there is no silver bullet when it comes to our infrastructure needs. We all would prefer a 5-year bill, but we need to get a bill passed. MAP 21, H.R. 14 is the path forward. I would urge my Republican colleagues to bring that bill to the floor so that we can vote for it in a bipartisan fashion, send it to the President. I yield back the balance of my time.
Madam Speaker,
Gentleman from Florida, Mr. Hastings.
I ask unanimous consent to insert the text of my amendment in the record along with extraneous material immediately prior or to the vote on the previous question. And Madam Speaker, I urge my colleagues to vote no and defeat the previous question. I urge a no vote on the rule, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Without objection, and the gentleman yields back the balance of his time. The gentleman from Florida, Mr. Webster.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Get back to the issue at hand. This is not necessarily a highway bill, but it does talk about a highway much faster than the ones we drive on. It's hard to imagine a world without a high-speed wireless internet service. Hard to imagine staffers walking down the hallway without some sort of wireless device that they're communicating with others on, and usually their hands are glued to it. Communication and technology innovations over the past several years have made us a more connected world. In some instances, the new global connectedness has brought us even closer together, allowing us to share in similarities and differences between our peers and distant cultures. It has given us a chance to marvel at the world's best athletes on the grandest stages, and in some cases it has exposed the atrocities of war, intolerance and disregard for human life. We want our innovations to continue innovating and our inventors to keep inventing. In the communication and technology fields, they have and they continue to amaze us with new breakthroughs every day. This bill simply pulls back the curtain on the FCC, the agency charged with regulating the communication sector. It asks them to institute common sense reforms to better keep the public informed on their actions. It requires the Commission to rigorously examine the marketplace before intervening, give increased time for public input and comment, and increase transparency while approving new rules and amendments. These process reforms are simply good government and should be embraced in a nonpartisan fashion. I ask my colleagues to join me today in voting in favor of this rule and the underlying bill. I yield back the balance of my time, and I move the previous question on the resolution.
The question is on ordering the previous question on the resolution. Those in favor will signify by saying aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Madam
Gentleman
Speaker,
from Florida.
Most respectfully, I ask for the yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. Those favoring a vote by the yeas and nays will rise. A sufficient number having arisen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. Pursuant to Clause 8 and Clause 9 of Rule 20, this 15-minute vote on ordering the previous question will be followed by 5-minute votes on the adoption of House Resolution 595 if ordered, suspension of the rules with regard to H.R. 3606, and suspension of the rules with regard to H.R. 3298 if ordered. This is a 15-minute vote.
Let me thank you all for being here. I've said many times, one of the things that makes our country so special and so great is this simple concept that parents are willing to make sacrifices for their kids so that when they grow up, they have life better than we did. They, in turn, do it for their children, and each generation in this great country has done that for the next. Now, unfortunately, what we have is and frankly, the blame is with both parties. For the last couple decades, we've had the political class live for the moment, spend for the moment, and decide it's okay to send the bill to the next generation. And that is just wrong. We have now reached a point, as you all know, where for the first time since World War II, we have a debt bigger than our entire economy, and it's time things change. And so what we want to unveil today, under the hard work of Scott Garrett and Mick Mulvaney and our Budget and Spending Task Force at the Republican Study Committee, is a budget that exercises fiscal discipline, that understands that basic concept that you shouldn't send the bill to someone else. You should pay for things. Each generation should pay for the things that they're actually spending the money on. And so we have a budget, a cut, cap, and balance budget that is consistent with what the vast majority of the House of Representatives voted on last year, when we voted to try to get a balanced budget amendment in the United States Constitution. We have a budget that we think is appropriate for how serious the situation we now face, and one that we think will solve the problem, do so in a sound way, in a way that will promote economic growth, in a way that will help our country. And so I want to turn it over to the guy who's done the work on this, the Vice Chairman of the Budget Committee, the Chairman of the Republican Task Force, Budget Task Force, Mr. Scott Garrett from New Jersey.
Greetings and good morning. Appreciate that. First of all, let me thank our chairman of the RC, Mr. Jordan, for all your leadership, not only on this issue, but all through this 112th Congress. And we very much appreciate that. I also like to commend, as he already did, Mr. Mulvaney, who has worked and his staff extraordinary manners. Also, the gentleman recently recognized by the Wall Street Journal for his efforts as well. And my other colleagues behind me who worked in yeoman's way to make sure that we would have the budget that we have before you today. So I will be brief, so I'll allow my colleagues to say a few words. Earlier today, I heard the famous quote, and I may get it a little bit wrong, by Thomas Paine, "Oh, that we may live in troubled times so that our children may live in peace." I think that is appropriate expression to keep in mind as we look to the budget process right now. Last past week, as you all know, that the House GOP laid out its Republican budget to deal with the debt and decline that will come about if we follow the president's path going forward and try to turn things around, try to reverse it. What we do here today is try to build off of, you might say, some of those plans that have been laid in that, and author a further plan to give, as Jim says, to cut spending, to place caps on it, and to provide for a balanced budget going forward. We do this by specifically reining in spending. We do this by making sure that our entitlement plans are protected not only for this generation but for future generations as well. Now, as we do all this, of course, it's important to keep in mind exactly where the President and the Democrats in the Senate specifically have been during this entire time. This has been a time when we have seen basically a train wreck, a slow-motion train wreck coming towards this country, one that is totally predictable. And where has the Senate been? Where has the President been? They have been out not taking part in the debate at all. As Jim made reference to before, the Senate has been absent without any leadership, without a budget for over how many days? 1,063 days during that period of time. The American people are asking for more. The American people say that we deserve better. The American people are asking this one simple question: when will Washington stop borrowing and spending my children's money? Well, we see that the answer is not coming from the White House. We see that the answer is not coming from the Senate as well. So the RSC has stepped up to the plate, as we have in the past as well, to provide a budget that will do just that. It will provide cuts. It will provide caps. It will provide a balanced budget in the future. It will answer the American public's request that Washington live within its means, just as every business, just as every family has to do as well. The RSC offers a different road and path to the future. Today, we offer a specific plan. Today, we are able to say that we will live in troubled times today so that our children in the future will be able to live in peace. And with that, I would like to turn the microphones over to my colleague, who, as I say, has done an extraordinary job on many aspects of this budget, and his staff as well, as he will agree. Gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. McElvaney.
Thanks. Yeah, appreciate that. Thanks very much. And I want to thank not only Mr. Garrett for his work on this budget, but thank everybody up here for the work on this budget and the work on making the GOP budget better. Because of the actions of the group behind us, the RSC, the budget that you're going to see offered by the larger Republican conference later this week is a really, really good budget, a much more conservative budget than we started off with at the beginning of the year. And the number that gets a lot of attention in Washington, not so much back home, is that discretionary spending level. When we started this debate at the beginning of this calendar year, everybody expected us to spend $1.047 trillion. That was the number for the cap for discretionary spending that was set in the Budget Control Act of last year. It's a number that very few people, if anybody up on this stage, supported. We thought it was simply too much. We have worked very hard to get that number down. The number that you'll see in the Ryan budget is 1028. The number that you'll see in our budget is 931. This is a number that has a lot of attraction to us for a couple of different reasons. First of all, it is the spending level from last year's budget. The Republican Study Committee budget that we offered last year actually had a discretionary spending level in this year of about $933 billion. The number, by the way, is also the same number as the second year of Ryan's budget last year, less than $97 billion sequester. That is a coincidence, but it is true. That number gets you down to 931. Coincidentally again, but just in a happy coincidence, the 931 is also the exact same level of discretionary spending the last time that Nancy Pelosi offered a budget. And many of us came to Congress in the 2010 elections promising to roll back discretionary spending to pre-stimulus levels. And those levels are $931 billion. So we'll set it there. That's the number we've been fighting for since January. It's a number we'll continue to fight for. And it's a number, by the way, that we'll keep, a number that we're going to freeze. It's a concept that seems rational to most of us. Evidently, it's not rational in Washington, D.C., that if you don't have money, the first thing you do is stop spending more money. So what we've decided to do is offer a budget that sets discretionary spending at 931 and keeps it there until the budget balances, which is in 5 years, 2017. It makes sense. It's something we think that folks back home will understand. It's something certainly we understand, which is that if you don't have any money, you at least stop spending what you're spending. So we'll set that number at 931 and leave it there. I don't know who goes next. Mr. Huelskamp did some tremendous work on the budget. There's one person that I could look to and say, this is a guy who helped us move the needle in the right direction on the Budget Committee this year, was Tim Huelskamp. So I'll let him chat for a little bit.
Thank Congressman Mulvaney, and I thank Congressman Jordan for his leadership, Congressman Garrett as well. And as I stated during the Budget Committee hearing last week, too many in Washington are focused on a particular date of November 6th. I think the two dates we need to be concerned about, rather, are April 1st and January 1st. Just 5 days from now, the U.S. will have the highest corporate tax rate in the world. At a time when we have high unemployment, we cannot afford to be number one on this list. And at the end of the year, the Bush-Obama tax cuts disappear, burdening Americans with the single largest tax increase in American history. I'm pleased the RSC budget includes reconciliation instructions that requires a tax bill by September 15th of this year, preventing the massive Schedule 4.3 trillion tax increase. While RSC recommends our Jobs Through Growth Act in our budget, it could also be revenue neutral, comprehensive tax reform. We leave that up to the committee. Whatever path we take, though, it's critically important that we prevent this tax increase from killing our fragile economic recovery. On a separate note, as the Supreme Court considers the constitutionality of Obamacare, this budget repeals the President's health care law in its entirety and incorporates a State Health Flexibility Act. That is Medicaid reform. And that embraces the type of reform that's successful welfare reform in the 1990s and converts Medicaid to a block grant program and restores the 10th Amendment and respects that and gives states the freedom and accountability they need in order to serve their people better. We will enhance accountability by putting states back in charge rather than nameless and faceless bureaucrats at CMS. Medicaid costs are exploding in Washington and in our states. In my background, I served 14 years in the state legislature, served on the Medicaid task force. I know the struggles our states have, and the idea from the President and others that we can simply add millions more to our Medicaid rolls is unsustainable. What we need is flexibility. What we need is to reduce the red tape out of Washington, give our governors, we have 29 governors who have requested this, give our governors the flexibility and the accountability on Medicaid so they can deal with what is the single fastest growing part of our state's budgets. That's what Washington can do. And I'm excited with those proposals, both the tax and the Medicaid side, because we know one size doesn't fit all on Medicaid. But we do know that the massive tax increases that would come rest on January 1st are certainly going to kill any economic recovery we have. And so I look forward to the debate on the floor, and I look forward to pushing this budget forward, because we need to have solutions. As was mentioned, you know, we have some tough choices to make today, but on taxes, we can promote a pro-growth agenda that actually is what I think the most of the American people would like to see. With that, I'll turn it over, I believe, to Congresswoman Vicki Hartzler is next.
Thank you very much. Good morning. You know, I'm here today not only as a representative from Missouri, but also as a mom. And the reason that I'm so supportive of our RSC budget is that it's going to provide a secure future for our children. You know, it does that in many ways. First of all, it takes us from a path of bankruptcy and takes us to a path of a balanced budget. I'm part of the freshman class, and I was sent here to pull our country back from the brink of bankruptcy and to put us on a new course for our children. And that's what we're going to do. With right now, my child and every child born in this America now has $48,000 worth of personal debt because of our tax and spending ways that Washington has been. Our national debt is now equal to our GDP, and this is unsustainable. Our children deserve a better future in America. It also provides a more secure future by removing our dependency on foreign countries in at least two ways. Our debt right now is held by many foreign countries, and China owns 29% of our foreign debt. I don't want to see my children continue to have further dependence on China. I want us to be independent here in America. It also reduces our dependency on foreign oil through the initiatives in here that will get us to a path of energy independence. So that is a way to make our children's future more secure. And it also prioritizes and reprioritizes our national defense. There's only a few things we're supposed to be doing here in Congress, according to the Constitution, and one of them is to provide for the common defense. The sequestration that is outlined in the President's plan is unsustainable, and it jeopardizes our national security. We address that in our budget and make sure through all of these ways that our children will have a secure future. Thank you.
I'm glad to be here. I looked at this group and I realize I'm the longest serving member, which is scary. But I've supported every RSC budget that we've put forward in the past decade, and I think had we adopted the early ones, we'd be a lot better off today. Now, this will be cast, I'm sure, by the other side and by some as a draconian budget. We're going, and you know, I can just hear it now, Grapes of Wrath music playing in the background. And we're taking the budget back to where it was in 2008. And I think across the country, people recognize that we've got to do more than we're currently doing if we're going to get this budget under control. So I'm pleased to support it. And as Mick mentioned, this is dragging the debate the right direction. The broader conference is producing a better budget because of this budget. So I'm pleased to support it.
I'm Cynthia Lummis from Wyoming, and I'm happy to stand here with my colleagues to make these points. Can we balance our budget within 10 years or less? Yes, we can. This budget proves it. Now, next question, why should that matter? Why should it matter to the mom who's pulling up to a gas pump and only putting in $5 of gasoline because she can't afford more? And the answer is this. What if that gallon of gasoline was $6.25 instead of $5? How could that happen? It could happen if the dollar is replaced as the world's reserve currency by a basket of currencies that include the Chinese currency, the Japanese currency, and others. When England ceased to be the reserve currency, the value of their pound dropped 25% immediately. That could happen to the dollar. That's why the single mom who's pulling up to a gas pump to get $5 worth of gasoline and would instead possibly be paying $6.25 for that same gallon of gasoline should be very concerned about our debt and our deficit. So let's return to that question. Can we balance our budget in 10 years or less? Yes, we can. The RSC budget proves it. Why should we? We should do it for every single mom, every struggling American, everyone who wants a higher standard of living for themselves and their children.
I'd be glad just to echo those words and say ditto really to everything that's been said. You know, if you'll notice, there's 5 out of the 9 that are standing up here came from the freshman class, and I think we came to Washington with a goal to get our financial health in order, our financial house in order here in this country. That's cut spending, that's rein in deficits, start paying back our debt. Those are the things that the American people expect us to do. And I'm wearing this button today, 1,063 days since the United States Senate has passed a budget and done the responsible thing for our nation. But, you know, last year we passed both a House budget and RSC budget. We're going to take those up again. I think the RSC budget is a clearer path for America to address the things that I personally believe we need to do. So I stand with a lot of hardworking colleagues that have helped craft this budget, and I fully stand behind it and support it. Look forward to talking about all the dynamics on the House floor and passing the RSC budget over to the Senate. Now yield back.
All right, we'll take a couple questions if you'd like. And yep.
Why does you want to repeal the health care law, but your budget includes a 10-year revenue number that assumes that tax increases in the law take effect and scheduled next year? Why use that revenue number?
Our budget does not assume the tax increases from the Obama numbers. No, that
it's the same $37 trillion that's in the Ryan budget, which also assumes that.
No, Ryan's budget does not assume that.
We're below the CBO baseline on revenue numbers.
Yeah, I would just make this. The only two differences, significant differences between our budget and the conference budget is what we do on discretionary spending, take it to 931 as Mick explained, and we hold it for 5 years. We think that's reasonable. A lot of American families have had to kind of freeze their spending and hold it. So we hold it there, and then we allow some inflated growth in discretionary. And the other thing we do is we say Medicaid and S-CHIP, we're going to give it to the states, as Tim talked about, which many governors want. We give it to the states at 2012 levels, and we say that's what you're going to get. The conference budget gives it to the states at 2012 levels and builds in an inflator. So those are really the two differences. And with those two differences, you can do what Americans, I think, expect us to do. You can get to balance in a reasonable period of time, which is what they have to do in their family budget and their business budget.
I think what you're getting at is
Mr. Reed. Mr. Reed votes aye. Mr. Adderholt. Mr. Adderholt votes aye. Mr. Langevin. Mr. Langevin votes no.
On this vote, the yeas are 236 and the nays are 182. And the yeas have it. The previous question is ordered.
The House will come to order. The Chair would ask all those present to rise for the purpose of a moment of silence. Members, please take your conversations off the floor. House will come to order. The Chair asks that the House now observe a moment of silence in remembrance of our brave men and women in uniform who have given their lives in service of our nation in Iraq and Afghanistan, and their families, and all who serve in our armed forces and their families.